Hey guys, and welcome to Pheas Software. Today I'm going to be doing disassembly on the SPECNA SAJ05 AK. Hey guys, and welcome back. If you do enjoy this content today, please do consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, because those interactions help me get seen by the YouTube algorithms, help the channel grow. You want to support the channel a little bit more, the Linktree link down below in the description will take you to all of my socials, including my Discord. Stop by and say hello. And if you want to support the channel even more, there is a join button down below. May not appear on some Apple devices. That will take you to channel memberships, 99p a month, totally optional, custom content, bloopers, private chat section in my Discord. Really appreciated if you do sign up for that, but totally optional. So today then, we did the unboxing. We're now going to do a disassembly of the SPECNA SAJ05 Edge Edition AK. Now, to get started then, this was something I was thinking about earlier when doing this video. To make it clear, there are two types of AKs to disassemble. There is the TM type, which when you flip it over in here, there will be two screws in here and there'll be two screws here as well. And when you take those out, the whole front assembly will just come out, making things a little bit quicker and easier, I suppose. This, I've heard this style as referred to as more the VFC style of build, where effectively everything is built via a series of pins that are all mounted into each other to build this up into one big solid piece. So this is the sort of, I'm going to refer to it as the VFC style, but I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, I apologise. Please let me know down below. So this requires a little bit more effort to get things apart. So the first thing I'm going to say is, if you want to get the muzzle brake off, there is a little pin right there. There we go. That pin just needs to be pushed in with a little, in this case, we'll go with a little flat head. I'm just going to push the pin in, and now, at this point, this part is on a traditional thread. Just going to pull it out of the way. Now, there we go. I am precariously balancing this on my knee off camera, so keep it on. Now, what that gives us is the adapter underneath. Now, this adapter should have a grub screw in it. Find the appropriate part, which, there we go. So what have I used on that? That is a Torx 6. I've just loosened that off, and then that now might need to take, the pin is causing issues. There we go. I can remove that to expose a 14mm negative thread underneath. So that is under there if you wanted an alternative device in there. So I'm just going to push that pin. There's a little spring in there. Oops, there it goes. I'm just going to push that pin back in. There's just a little hole in there where the spring is, and that's just going to go back in there, out of my sight and mind. Right, I'm just going to tighten that grub screw back in. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to come off to be able to do anything else in this disassembly. There we go. Right, nice and secure in there. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take this little side tab here, I'm going to flick it round, and what you can see there is there's like a little barrel securing system there. So as I get it round, it should go flat like that and allow me to lift the upper handguard up and out. Now, just to be aware of, there is like a little metal clip here, this little metal frame that is sort of a little bit springing. It helps to keep it pushed securely between the fronts to the gas block and the back here. So obviously keep that in mind. Next we're going to do is we've got a little pin lift handle there that we're going to lift up, and that then will come out, and which should then allow this little front part to wiggle forward. There we go, and bottom handguard just slides forward, so you can see there's like a retaining lug system there, so that just goes into the bottom there and slides out. So at this point you can, if you want, we could just take the gas tube out. So all I did was just pulled on it until it cleared the muzzle brake and then slid it out. Sometimes these are screwed in at the back as well, on some models, but not on this one. It was just sort of stuck in. Next thing we do is we've got a front pin here that we're going to punch out, and then we've got another pin here, and that should release this assembly and partially the barrel as well. I'm just going to leave the top cover on a little bit longer just because it makes things easier to grab than having the wiring flailing about. So I'm just going to take this off camera. I'm just going to punch this pin out. There's the pin knocked out then. It's just sort of like a little roll pin. There's no particular direction it will go in, although this end, one end does seem slightly more tapered. This end seems slightly more tapered, so I might push that back in that way just to help it go back in. Don't be alarmed at the amount of effort that's required to punch these pins in. They are, quite difficult to get back in. This pin looks like I'm going to have to knock it out from this side because the metal looks like it's wrinkled up on the back of the pin a little bit, so I'm guessing it's coming from that side, so it needs to go out that way. So again, I'm just going to take this off camera and punch this out. Now, I was absolutely right. So this pin came out. Apologise if I keep taking things off camera, I'm trying to get used to it again. So there are teeth on this end. Those teeth were on this side over here. Okay, so keep that in mind. But again, needed a fair bit of effort. This point, the top cover can come off as well. So this assembly now just literally just wiggles forward and free, and it's loose. Now you will see we've got a couple of notches here, one there and one there. Those need to be on the top, and those are the pins. That's what one of the pins that we've just taken out, and that was the front handguard retainer that we saw up there. Now that we're in here, what we can do is a couple more bits quickly. I'm just going to push the selector down. I'm going to push this button in, and I'm going to lift it up, and that's going to release the spring and rod. The charging handle then will just slide back and up and out. Now, if you're wondering about that, how it goes together, I'll show you from the side. So there's the handle. So there is just a hole inside, and we just feed that in through there. And that is how that assembly sits together inside the AK when you reassemble it. But I'll show you that when we get back to it. Get things out of the way. Right, so first thing we've got up here is we've got a wedge here that should just lift out. It is a little bit tricky, but what this does is helps to keep the hop unit wedged backwards, so you're not just relying on the screws there. So that literally just wiggles up and out. Put that out of the way. Underneath, we've got a blanking plate here that helps secure things. So I'm just going to get Phillips head and undo this and remove this plate. So there's just two little screws. One. No, this should. There we go, just lifts out. It's just a little plastic plate, two little teeth on it, so the screws go to the back. Well, that's one part of it. There is another part of it there, which is screwed in to here. So before I release the barrel out, what I'm going to do is undo those two screws there. They're in the hop unit. Now those two screws, one of them's now missing. Those two screws are sort of like the, is it round top pan head I want to say, and the two that came from underneath are the more angular type headed ones. I apologise, I can never remember the names of them, terrible. That plate now is allowing the hop unit to move, as you can see. So that's allowing that to move. And what we can do now is we can undo this group screw here, which will release the barrel at last. Is that size? A bit big. What are you, a T8? A Torx 8 or T8 bit is the one that I've just used on that grub screw. So that now, there we go, there comes the barrel, sliding out and releasing. So there's our outer barrel now completely removed. There's our hop unit assembly. Again, just trying to, there we go, wiggle it free of this retaining block here. So I'm just going to put that down. So there is our traditional AK style hop. Now I've put the hop, the barrel is spotlessly clean, and hopefully you can see in there now, that is the hop fully on. It didn't have to go all that way to hop 0.25 gram BB, so it should be able to easily do much heavier. There's quite a nice firmness to adjusting it as well. It doesn't feel like some of these AKs, these sliding styles, they just unwind over time because of the nature of it. That one doesn't feel so much like that's going to happen. Now let's just have a look in here. I don't want to, there is a retaining screw down in there. Do you know what, let's just have a look. So there is a traditional buffer screw in there, and I can see that it's coming loose. There we go, there's the clicking. So, I'm not sure. This adapter is actually plastic and not metal on the back, but it is mounted. It looks like it's on a traditional AK stock. We'll have another explore of that in a moment. First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to get the gearbox out. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some needle nose pliers to grip onto this selector screw. Just 1 second. So I've got the needle nose, so I'm just going to grab on that, and I just want to grab it enough initially to loosen it up, which I've done. Loosen that up, there's the screw. Now I'm just going to lift the selector up, and is it going to bring, so there's the selector and the orientation it should sit in, and then we've got this little sort of like cam piece and the little brass tube inside it. There we go. So I'm just going to flip that over to show you. So this way here, this little notch here where my thumb's pointing goes into there, into the selector in there. So you know now that the orientation ends up like that. That little notch goes in there, and that keeps it all orientated correctly. And then to drop the gearbox out, we're just going to take this screw out the bottom here. Actually ridiculously hard doing this, leaning over a table and floating it in the air. So the motor is plastic heat shrinked for some reason, how bizarre, but okay. So I'm just going to keep it in this orientation because all the selector parts will fall off if I don't. I'm just going to gently work that up and out. Now, the selector components were just sort of wedging against the underside of the body, so what I did was just got a flathead just lightly in there, just to pry it enough just to release the selector out. So now I can wiggle the gearbox and motor out the rest of the way. There is our Orion gearbox and motor, and I'll discuss the sort of selectors when we put it back together. We've got our gate Aster in there. We'll open this up short in a moment to have a look at. I'll put that out of the way. Just have a quick look at, there is actually room. I don't know how well the camera can pick that up, fairly well. You can see you could in theory wire this out to the stock because it's got the correct AR type retaining lug in there that's got the gap for the wiring to come out. So if you chose, you could in theory wire this out to the stock. Let's just see if I can get the rest of this off. So T15, a Torx 15 is working in that top screw there. That's one. And again underneath. There we go. And I'm guessing it did just slide off. So that is the bracket on the back of the body. that is the bracket that goes on, and it has basically just slid off straight away. It is plastic, and it will allow, there is room in there to allow wiring if you need to, for whatever reason, to be done to the stock. So I'll just screw those back in. One screw. Right. Oops. Get that out of the way a second. We'll have a look inside the gearbox. So I'm going to pull these selectors off. So there's the main selector arm, the safety cut off, put those to one side. Next thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to remove this little screw here. It will sort of rotate and move about until you've got the sort of the friction gone. I'm going to keep that little screw that came with that together with the cam from the other side. We've got a plate across the top that I'm going to pry off. Now what you do need to do is be careful that it's not nipping and catching these wires as you're putting it off. So I'm just going to get a flat head that I'm just going to put in there. And I'm just going to lever it off like that, and I'm just conscious of the wire in there. Just taking the wire in with it instead of letting it go, but okay, there we go. There we go. So that's now come off, and that just sits on the top, across the top like that. And then we've got this little clip here. Now I can see there is a little bit of grease coming out onto this. That's absolutely fine. We have got bearings in there. I'm just going to get a little flat head under there. There we go. There we go. So just unhook that. It literally just clips in place. I'm going to undo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. Now these two are going to be different to the others, so I'm going to keep those separate. Those are the motor screws. These two I think usually are the same, maybe even that one as well, and that one is different because it's shorter. So in fact no, that one's short, that one's a little bit longer. Those two are different to those two, so make sure that you are keeping your screws secure and you know exactly where they're coming from. In fact, you know, I've just realised it is a quick change gearbox, but you cannot do it still inside. You're going to have to remove the gearbox to get access to it. There is our spring change system, so it was just push in, quarter turn, remove. So there's the front screw, little tiny short one. Just going to put that there. There's the second screw, a little bit longer. Those are pan heads, I would say. Then we've got the more angular one length. I'm going to take the one out of the back first before I do the motor ones. There's the other one. Those two are identical that have come from those two places. And then first motor screw, you can see those are longer again than any of the others. Second motor screw, there we go. Now I'm not going to cut up the plastic shrink wrap on there. I'm just going to leave that in place. I'm just going to hold it with the wires and then just going to wiggle that off. Random bit of fluff on there. So we're just going to open that up now. Because there's no compression, I don't have to worry too much. The sector gear is trying to come with us. Got to stay there, buddy. There we go. So there's the top half. They've daubed the blue grease in. We'll have a look at the compression. It looks like bog standard sort of Chinese XYT gears, I'm guessing it is. So got the blue cylinder head and cylinder, unvented, blue piston head. Let's have a look. Air is escaping around the cylinder head, but there is good compression there. I can't tell if that's because I'm moving it a little bit maybe, and if it's locked in the body possibly won't have the same issues, but there is some pretty good compression in there. That is an O-ring nozzle as well to help with compression, so let's just, slightly worse, but there is still some good compression in there. I'm still happy that there is compression in there. Now the shimming, the shooting test in the unboxing video may not have done it justice, but the shimming actually sounded pretty decent. The gearbox turns over nicely. They have made an effort. There are shims on both sides of each gear, so I'm quite happy with that. Quite a derby. It looks a little bit dry on top of these gears, but everything else looks nice, looks to be working nice. Fairly well built gearbox from what I can see. A little bit disappointed in the greasing. I was hoping for a bit better quality greasing, but never mind. So I've reassembled this. So we've got the air nozzle on the end of the tappet plate assembled. We've got the piston with its teeth in line with this tappet plate here, and we're going to hook this spring onto this peg and pull it all back and drop it in. Now these lugs here on the front of the cylinder, there's one in the bottom half, there's one in the top half. That's what centralizes it. So I'm just going to put that on there. In fact, I made a boo-boo. I'm going to turn the gear set to get the teeth. These teeth here pull the piston, and I'm going to pull those around because this helps reassembly. So I'm now going to hook that on. There we go, perfect. Now what I'm doing is I'm just checking underneath that the cylinder is sat in this opening for it neatly. I'm just going to check that the piston is sat on its runners, and it is. And I've just noticed that that shim has jumped off there. Just click that a bit. Right, so we've now got the shim is back on there. So those are the little washers on the tops and the bottoms of the gears to help them align within the gearbox to try and make it run nicer and sound a little bit nicer. The trigger has so far stayed in place, as has the anti-reversal latch. So the anti-reversal latch is on a little spring. There's a little arm here, and it's the spring is pushing the arm onto this gear. So when the shot's fired or it's spun so far, it doesn't unwind. We don't want that unwinding. So at the minute, that's exactly where it should be. I'm now going to drop this back over the top. So I'm going to start from the front and then angle it back like that, because it helps to get it located into that lug there, and then it drops it back onto the gears. Now what you're going to have to do here is a little bit of I always make it look so easy. That rarely happens, honest to God. That rarely happens that drops in as easy as it did. So all the gears and the anti-reversal latch all dropped into position. The trigger is in position. The gearbox is back flush together. It is literally ready to reassemble already. That's so rare that happens. It's usually anybody that techs will tell you that version 3 triggers can be an absolute nightmare to get back in the gearbox. So I'm just going to wiggle the motor back in place, and I'm going to put all of those screws back on first of all. So I'm going to start with the motor screws. I'm going to take the next two long screws, which are those two there. I'm going to take the next one, which goes at the front there. I'm going to take the little short one. I'm going to put there. And then I'm going to click that in place. There we go. Always make sure you do that, because that's the one I always forget. Next, I can bring in the spring and the spring guide. I'm just going to wiggle them in so it sits in position. I'm just going to push it in, quarter turn until it locks back flush. Happy with that. Next is to bring in the top retainer. So the little gap at the back is going to go to this little notch here. So I'm just going to slowly start feeding that on, and as I get to there, I'm going to hoop the wires underneath this first clip. Now if you've got a AEG without the MOSFET in it, an AK, you'll be wondering why there's so many wires, and it's because of that, basically, that there are so many, that you've got sort of the wires going to and from the motor, battery, and the MOSFET itself. So I'm just slowly and steadily just working those wires in as I'm pushing this in, being careful not to like sort of crimp or nip anything. So just took that off camera then, just to basically what I did was just got a flathead and just pushed it down so that it came back in. So what I'm looking for is that the motor wires that come up from the motor are sort of got a little bit of free movement, because they need to be positioned quite precisely when we drop it back in the body. That's still moving about, which is the sticker on the selector, and that nothing's been nipped or crimped nipped or crimped in any way. I'll just drop that back on. If that does happen, it literally just falls back in place. It's not hard to get this back on. In there, in there. There we go, that's better. So all I did was hooked it on and dropped it into place like that, and now it's going to go through absolutely happy. I'm just going to leave those up. So next thing we need to do is we need to bring in this little cam here. So this lever, this little half cog goes in here, and it interfaces with this. Now lift it up and drop it in. Those teeth need to interact like that. Bring that under the camera, there we go. So I've dropped it in place. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 teeth on the blue selector plate, and they need to interact with those 4 gaps there. So I know that's in the right place. I'm going to flip that over now. I'm going to bring back the other half a gear, which is right there, and drop that on. It will only go on one way. I'm going to bring in the screw for that. And we're going to use our Phillips head. Again, make sure you go backwards until it clicks into the threads, and make sure that's nice and tight. And I should be able to see that it's still all synced up nicely like that. Perfect. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in this cut off lever bit. So there is a square notch. That square notch is going to drop in there. That is your physical safety right there. And then this other part is going to, again, marry up. The teeth are all going to marry up nicely like that. I'm going to pull it down that way. So that, with the teeth at the end, and that in that place there, that now is safe. And then you've got auto, and then you've got semi, and back again. So our gearbox now is ready to drop back into here and start putting everything back together. So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to feed it down. Again, I'm keeping my finger on this selector set up because I don't want it to fall apart. It has nicely gone under there. Now I'm not had to wedge anything open, and it's dropped into place along here, and it should sit nicely in this opening here. Now, quick point to note, these motor wires here need to come up this gap here. That gap is there deliberately to keep it available for these wires to come up that gap there and sit up there. So make sure that they are not, you know, forward too far back, otherwise they're going to get nipped and crimped. It should not need forcing back into the body, otherwise you are going to break something. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pistol grip back on, because that screw in the bottom there will keep it secure. So I've just clicked that in place, and I can see that the threads are there waiting. I'm going to drop that in. Now what I'm going to do initially is I'm not going to tighten this down. I'm just going to do it enough that it just pulls on it a little bit, and that just secures it. Okay, so it's not going anywhere. Then what I'm going to do is bring in the little brass tube and the notch. So we're looking for that little opening there, and that's going to sit into there nicely like that. I'm going to drop the selector on top, like that. Again, it all marries up nice and squared off, and then I'm going to bring the screw in. Again, I'm just going to use my fingers to tighten that down initially. I'm going to come back at the end and fully tighten that down, but I've got safety back again. So pull that back through. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to feed the barrel back in and start reassembling the front. What I am going to do first is I'm going to find the other screw for the barrel. Okay, so I found that little screw now, so we can continue. So just going to slide that down in through the front there. You are going to need to put the hop probably fully on. Make sure to remember to take it off again. And I'm going to drop it into the holder, which then goes on like that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put those two screws in. In fact, do you know what? I'm not, because it's going to put a lot of pressure on the hop and the barrel. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring in the outer barrel and secure that down, and then it supports the barrel. So I'm just going to slide that in, and what I'm looking for here is this first notch here. When I get down there, this notch here is going to marry up with this hole, which was the first big pin. So I'm just going to wiggle that in there until I can see it's lined up. There it is. Now initially, I'm just going to use the, was it a T10? No, it's T8. T8. I'm just going to tighten that down initially, but not mega tight, just tight enough that it holds it. I'm then going to bring back the body pin, and I'm going to punch the body pin back in, back into that hole. So again, remember that the teeth should be on this side, so I'm putting the not teeth end in first. I'm going to go off camera and punch this back in. So I'm not gonna lie, it's the worst bit of these is this front pin here is an absolute pain. Once you've got it in though, it is going to take a little bit wet. I'm just going to extra tighten down that little drum screw, torque 8 just to make sure that everything's okay. But things now can sort of move on. Now this isn't going to be sort of reliant on holding the outer barrel in place. So I'm just going to slide that plate back. The hop basically needs to go, or will go back into the gearbox. We'll sort that in a minute. We're just going to drop these two Phillips heads in, drop that out of the way. That's one in. That's the second in. Now obviously don't forget to turn your hop fully off. So the hop unit then should just pushed it back into and flushed it up against the front of the gearbox there. That's where it should be. Make sure the hop's fully off. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back in this blanking plate here that is going to retain it back and keep it from going. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to put this little plate in the front here. So as it's sat, it goes in like that and then drops down. And we just need a Phillips head just to sink those screws back in. Again, make sure that the screws go in the correct thread, that you're not damaging. They should go in easily. If you're having to force it, you're not in the threads properly. That's one. That's two. So now that is all secured back against the gearbox. So happy with that. Next, we're going to bring this back in, and I'm going to just go off camera and just knock that pin back into there. There is a little roll pin. So I'm just made sure that the notch in the barrel lined up with the hole, and then I've just used a small hammer just to nudge all that back in. Excuse me. Next I'm going to bring the lower handguard. That's just going to go up and in like that. I'm going to bring the front retaining clip back in, and we need our little lever there. So don't forget the little lever has got a little gap, a little notch in it. So the notch needs to go in down because it goes over the barrel, and then we just flip it over, and now that won't move at all. Handy, perfect. Next thing then, we bring the upper in. We're just going to drop that back in place. Again, this little handle needs flipping over, and we should see it starts dropping in, and it does. Lock that back down. That's done. We can next bring in charging handle. I'm just going to drop that in place. Move the selector for a second. Slide that along. I'm going to bring the rod and spring for it. That just fits and feeds into the little hole there, as you can see. Oop. Oop. Move that into place. Might need a little bit of friendly helping along. There we go. That's just to get it there through those two connectors, and then it just, he says, comes out again. There we go. And then it sits and hooks in those rails there. The charging handle now works. Put the top cover back on. It's locked into place. Last thing to do then is just the stock tube back on, which AR1, so it just sits on its lugs. Just got on off camera just because I need to get my screwdriver down in there. Found the back of the threads, tighten that down. I can see it's tightening up, and nice and tight. Stock goes on, pull down on the handle. There we go, fully reassembled. Whoa, wait, whoa, Pheas, come on. Gas tube. So the gas tube literally just goes in again, goes in again, and we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until, there we go, it slots into place like that. There we go, we have done and dusted and reassembled. I hope you've enjoyed that. I found it quite stressful, I'll be honest. Don't forget now at this point, get your needle nose back on there and tighten that down. Get your Phillips head back on the bottom there and tighten that down. Don't forget to check it with a battery that you've still got safe, auto and semi, because if you haven't, if they're mixed up, it means that those little gears have jumped about on that selector. And other than that, you are done and dusted. Hope you've enjoyed that. I found it immensely stressful because of that front body pin. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.